Oftentimes, the first step is buy-in to a more holistic model of well-being. And there's some stats out there that are really great around that. For example, if you are thriving in your work, you're about 2 times more likely to be thriving in your life. It is that highest single determinant of our overall happiness. So it's really good for your people, to create a work environment where they're thriving. And it's absolutely no secret that it's very good for your work. So you're going to have higher productivity, innovation, you're going to have lower turnover, attrition, lower stress and burnout. But the impact of that on our lives is something we don't often look at. They're going to be healthier, more fulfilled, have better relationships, and live longer if they're happy at work. And the same goes the other way. And that's what we haven't put much attention to. If you are thriving in your life, you're also going to have significantly less stress, anger, worry, burnout. You'll be higher in resilience and adaptability in the workplace. And the opposite is true as well, is if we are not thriving in our lives, not only do we have a whole host of physical and mental challenges that we're going to be dealing with, but we're also going to have higher burnout, stress, daily worry, sadness, anger, higher risk to the organization and to our organizational goals.
Hey friends, welcome to the Changing Work Podcast. We are so glad you're here.
My name is Nick.
And I'm Scott.
And this is the podcast where we talk about changing work from the inside out.
So if you're into making the workplace and the world a better experience via conscious business practices, stick around. This is for you. Hi, Sunny.
Hi, Scott. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome. And I'm just going to read a little bit of your bio here, Sunny, and then we'll get into it. But welcome. So glad to be with you. So Sunny is a workplace expert, a leadership coach, consultant, and global speaker. She studied the science of happiness, well-being, and business approaches. And she brings her rich experience and vibrant background together as a world-class speaker and thought leader in the culture space. She's known for creating unforgettable experiences for people, teams, and companies, planting seeds of change that continue to ripple outward to communities, countries, and the world. Love it. Sounds pretty good.
Goes along with your me-we theme.
Beautiful. Well, before we dive in, first of all, welcome to Monday. This is a great kind of way to start your week, right?
It is.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Happy Monday.
What's one thing that makes your heart light up?
New beginnings. Waking up in the morning, turning over a new mood, just finishing one thing and launching into the next. Yeah, I love new beginnings. It's just an opportunity to reinvent yourself, to be more in that moment. I mean, I'm a growth junkie. I love growing and evolving. I love to understand our capacity and what we're capable of as individuals and teams. And so, for me, this sort of like renewal and this idea of learning and that every moment is really within our hands to change and to take control over and to learn, to do something different, to fail, to try again, all of that. That's a really inspiring concept to me.
That is beautiful. I got lost there for a second in new beginnings and all the possibility.
Yes, it's loaded with possibility.
Loaded with possibility. So maybe for friends watching, just take a second and think about possibility in your own life and new beginnings. I imagine a little sprout. I just planted the garden here in Northern California, and there's sprouts and little green things coming, and it's kind of a beautiful metaphor for our chat today.
I love that. And we don't so easily and readily notice the possibilities and the positive, in our environment. And positive psychology has done a lot to help us become more aware of that, but it still is a practice. So new beginnings is one way I practice it.
Awesome. Well, the title of our chat today is Engagement is No Longer Enough. Well-being is the new measurement, which I love that. Tell me what it means. How do we, if I'm a business leader listening in, how do I measure this? How do I measure well-being?
Well, for a long time, we've thought about engagement as this sort of foundational measurement that's going to give us access and really drive all the business outcomes that we desire: productivity, innovation, adaptability, teamwork, collaboration. In the days of hybrid work, some of those have become much more important. But as we learn more and more, a a lot of times that foundational kind of root post gets pushed back, and we start to see what's really behind some of these curtains. It's like pulling back the curtain, and the pandemic did a lot to do that, to pull the curtain back on many things, really, on our happiness, our well-being in many ways. And it's pretty clear that engagement is an outcome of our well-being. If you have engagement, it doesn't mean that you're well and feeling well-being in all areas of your life. But if you have well-being, you are going to be engaged. So it's really thinking more about, okay, what's the real driving force here? The human motivational driving force is more well-being. And, we're starting to see more statistics come out with that too. Like, what do employees want the most? They want holistic well-being. So it's also defining well-being in a broader sense, because we're not one compartmentalized, well person, only there with our work mask on. We really have to think about how the whole being is well, and the whole thing affects our business outcomes.
That's fantastic. And it makes sense intuitively. When you go to measure it, what's the best way to do this? Is it employee surveys, self-selected, or how do you get at it?
Measurement's not my specialty entirely, but we do use engagement surveys, and there's plenty of baselines that you can take. So you can always measure engagement, you can measure productivity, you can measure, even connection to mission, vision, values of your organization, to see if people feel a sense of belonging and identity within the organization. But when we're measuring well-being, we want to kind of take a step back and look a little more holistically at how that employee and that individual is really feeling whole and well in their life. And this includes a whole additional set of oftentimes a little more softer branded stuff, but that soft stuff is really what's driving, more of our hard ROI, more and more today too, especially as technology takes over and EQ and SQ skill set starts to come back into play.
Maybe tell us a little bit about why this work is important to you and your backstory. How did you get to this place?
Yeah. Thanks, Scott. Well, you know what? I was not thriving in my life for many, many years. And I think, as most of us may have some form of reflection of how we ended up identifying what it is we're really good at. Oftentimes it's in our shadows, and it's in what, we've really struggled with. So I came from a family where there was a lot of survival instinct. My mother was a survivor. That's what I was taught, kind of climb over other people and, make your way that way. And I always just wanted something different. And that became more and more clear as I got older. And I was sort of on this search for what happiness, how much I could stack up in my life, in all kinds of different ways, superficial ways, pleasureful ways, also in ways that were much more meaningful in terms of purpose. And right around the end of 2010, 2011, I joined a company called Delivering Happiness, which was co-founded by Tony Hsieh. We built that company into an Inc. 5000 fastest growing company. I was sort of a founding employee there. And since then, I've branched out on my own to really kind of talk a little bit more in terms of this idea of whole being well-being, and putting the whole human in the center of our business efforts for, in terms of what we're really focusing on in terms of our culture, our growth, the KPIs and ROIs that what we want to see. And if we zoom out a little bit and focus on this whole being, well-being, how much more flowing and easy it can be to achieve that ROI, and what differences, can be made. For example, what would it look like to really be in an organization that was truly happy and whole in that sense, that you operated from a place of belief and abundance instead of fear and doubt. So how would that change how you showed up in the work environment? And then really, how do we do that? What are the technical ways to do that? And that's really what I spend my time on.
So if somebody comes to you and says, all right, we want to move up the rankings or be number one in this whole best place to work, area. What are the types of things that you work with them on?
Well, first I would ask to look at any kind of measures that they have to see what they're measuring. And because what we measure is really where we're going to put our attention and manage. Oftentimes the first step is buy-in to a more holistic model of well-being. And there's some stats out there that are really great around that. For example, if you are thriving in your work, you're about 2 times more likely to be thriving in your life. It is that highest single determinant of our overall happiness. So it's really good for your people, to create a work environment where they're thriving. And it's absolutely no secret that it's very good for your work. So you're going to have higher productivity, innovation, you're going to have lower turnover, attrition, lower stress and burnout. But the impact of that on our lives is something we don't often look at. They're going to be healthier, more fulfilled, have better relationships, and live longer if they're happy at work. And the same goes the other way. And that's what we haven't put much attention to. If you are thriving in your life, you're also going to have significantly less stress, anger, worry, burnout. You'll be higher in resilience and adaptability in the workplace. And the opposite is true as well, is if we are not thriving in our lives, not only do we have a whole host of physical and mental challenges that we're going to be dealing with, but we're also going to have higher burnout, stress, daily worry, sadness, anger, higher risk to the organization and to our organizational goals. But here's the kicker. We can measure how well we're doing at work. We can measure what percentage of people are thriving at work and what percentage of people are thriving in life. But we don't pay a lot of attention to who's thriving in both elements. And I wonder if you have any guesses on that, Scott. What percentage do you think are thriving in both?
Wow, of employees that are thriving in both their personal and their work life? I'm going to guess less than 30%.
Oh, that's so optimistic. That's beautiful. I love it. That's lovely. I have a lot of people say 1% to me when I ask that question. Well, it turns out that not even 30% of us are thriving in our work or our life separately. And when you look at who's thriving, it's about 27 to 29%.
Individually
in work or in life.
Wow.
And when we look at the overlap, who's the percentage thriving in both, it's 9% globally.
Wow.
So it's pretty low, and it's really time to change that, to think about the whole being's role in the workplace.
I guess the only good news. The good news there is that there's opportunity. There's plenty of opportunity for all of us to make change, both individually and with the folks that we work with.
Yeah.
So when we think about the context of the state of wellness in the workplace, I mean, this is one aspect of it. I'm wondering what you're seeing in terms of companies. Kind of if I look back over time, over the past 10 years, maybe there's more interest in wellness. And then for sure during COVID, and then now post-COVID or whatever it is we're in, I'm not sure what's happening with companies as employment becomes tightening up and they don't have to do as much as they did before, we'd say. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious what you're seeing.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that the breakdowns have happened, the breakdown of the 9-to-5 workday. So we've seen a lot of breakdowns going on in the work world, but the breakthroughs, they've been a little less obvious. And there have been significant breakthroughs as well. And in fact, I kind of liken this whole era to sort of a workplace renaissance. We have the ingredients, sweeping change, destruction of really ingrained paradigms is here. So the possibility to change on a much broader scale and to have this sort of renaissance of workplace wellness or well-being, it's here. And we just have to pay a little bit more attention to what the breakthroughs are. So for example, we've learned a lot about purpose. And purpose is really sort of in a category of more spiritual practices in terms of the whole person's well-being. And it's been approached by talking about vision, values, and purpose. And we've made it a part of the culture puzzle. But there really have been sort of trends in terms of let's think more about the organization's purpose. And very importantly in that, it doesn't work if you don't think about the individual's purpose and how that aligns to it. So back to that me-we concept, which I talk about as me-we world. Because you've got to start with your own idea of what your purpose is, what's meaningful to you in your life. And then you can meaningfully extend that, link it, align it to why you're at this organization with these people. And when we miss that alignment or that mindset, that way of seeing it or storying it, many ways we can think about that, but it really is a vision of connection. then we miss a lot of the meaning involved in our role and a way to connect meaningfully with the people around us. So there's one example of, breakthroughs is around purpose at work.
Sure. For sure, we see an increase in generally employees and people more generally wanting more purpose in their jobs, right? I read one statistic said 9 out of 10 people would take a job that paid less if they could have more meaning in the work that they do. And so I'm curious, as you're working with leaders and companies and HR groups, how do we help connect the dots for folks so that they can have more meaning or more purpose in the work they do?
Yeah. We can talk all day about it. We can offer all kinds of paths and tools, and I do in talks. And, that's always something that's highly requested. Give us tools and things that we can do. And what it really comes down to create that change. Now we're talking about change management and organizational development and design, but it's a personal experience. What does it mean to you, Scott, in your life personally, to approach something that you care about with more of a filter or a mindset of meaning? It could be anything too. It can be, the meaning of your dinner time with your family around the table, if you do that, or with your friends, if you don't have a family. So I think, really starting with the individual and their relationship to it is what creates lasting results, because then you still might start with a leadership team, and then you might work with the middle management, which is an important layer there. But then you have all of these sort of multipliers of well-being, as one of my friends calls it. So you get people invested and involved in their own well-being, their own health and happiness, and they become these advocates of it. And that's how the change really takes root in a more sustainable way. Otherwise, you get a lot of little changes and a little hacks. I think the time of hacks is kind of ending. Sometimes you need that little quick hit for momentum, but truly we need to be focusing on the changes that will take more root.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I believe to be true is that you're a yoga teacher. Is that true in San Francisco?
That is true. Yeah.
And the science of yoga, is it similar to the science of happiness, and how?
It's interesting. A little background. I have been teaching yoga for about 5-6 years now, a while, but I've just come out with it. While
You've been a closeted yoga teacher? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I really thought it would diminish my professional, reputation or people's idea of me. And
first of all, I just want to say that is so sad that we have to cover like that. But thank you for coming out. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we all have things that we feel that way about. But one of the really core foundational pieces of our well-being is the ability to be our true selves, to take off the mask, to be who you are. We talk a lot about psychological safety and belonging, which are very related to this. Values is very related to this. Even purpose, we'll get to it. Just about any branch that you look at in positive psychology will either help you get to know your true self, or it will require you to do so on the way there. They're interlinked. And I thought, this is hypocritical that this part of my life is in the closet. So I brought it out. And since then, it is probably the #1 curiosity on interviews. So it's been fun.
It's such a powerful thing. I have a similar experience. I was an executive at LinkedIn. And then for a while, I was volunteering as a meditation teacher. And so, but I was terrified of it for exactly the same reasons you're talking about. I had this mental thing like, okay, what are people going to think of me? What is this going to do for my brand? Are they going to take me seriously? All that noise.
Yes. And it's a lot of doubts, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's doubt, and it's ego. It's vanity, really.
Wow.
It's, to call it. So and it sounds like, I'll speak for myself, and it sounds like you're saying the same thing. Once I became who I really was, it was so freeing. It's like, oh, I finally get to be me and stop pretending.
Yeah.
And then what I heard from people is like, thank God you're you. I thank you for being you and modeling the way. So Sunny, thank you for being you and modeling the way in your own health and teaching people.
Happiness takes a lot of courage. It doesn't happen without looking into the shadows. I love the Carl Jung quote too, because quote kind of gets really to humanity and our our purpose for being here. I think he says, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. So we are just always on this search to understand more about who we truly are. And when we hide that, even in small ways, we miss all these opportunities to relate in ways that bring our magic out about who we are. And so some of the magic that's come out for me is I've had some conversations and people say, well, we'd like a talk on the intersection of yoga and happiness. And so I've been starting to offer that.
Nice. That is beautiful. Well, if you could get every leader, not just the person in charge of wellness, but leaders in charge of the business, to implement a single practice, maybe a best practice, what would it be?
One single practice. This is almost like a hacks question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe you can take it wherever you like then. But
sure. I would say connection. So I would choose something in the theme of connection. I mean, I think 2024 is sort of this year of the relationship reset. We've been through, breakups and getting back together, and now hybrid and long distance relationships, if you want to equate it to that. And we're understanding a lot more about what really makes teams, organizations managing, with your teams, leading them as an HR leader, what makes them tick. And connection has really risen to a huge driver of belonging, of feeling a sense of identity within the organization, to feeling, even allowing the sense that my organization cares about me, which is a very important indicator of if you're going to stay or not, attraction and attrition. So I would say, having the courage to really make a connection and belonging strategy and to stick to it. It's not just soft work that can happen on the sidelines. It's something that needs to be much more front and center and much more thought out and committed to. And it's not always easy. There's layers of it. There's structural and functional and meaningful levels of connection. And this is something that I do work with teams on as well. Is, hey, we're hybrid now. How do we connect? What are some of the ways that we can do it? What are simple ways that we can ingrain it, ritualize it, so that it just doesn't become some of that fluffy stuff, but it actually becomes part of our work and even something that we're measuring.
The things that we're talking about are, first of all, genius, but they're also not rocket science. It's not necessarily new information. And so I'm curious, what gets in our way, right? If these things are so almost obvious and they're not that complicated, why don't we do them better?
Yeah, I love that. And this is sort of back to my opening comment. We need a tremendous amount of reminders for anything that we're going to do today, because the pace of change has increased so rapidly. Exponential is the word that came around in the pandemic. And I think that's still true. And technology has driven a lot of it. Jackie Woodside has this great quote. She says, technology has outpaced our neurology. So we really can't keep up with the flood of information and change, and our requirements as leaders and managers and HR managers to change, to stay on top of it all. Our minds can't handle all of that. It's just too much. So we filter, and those filters have gotten more stubborn. They let less things in. That goes back to our reticular activating system, the part of the brain that actually lets these images into our, more conscious memory. And in order to really see change, it has to be consistent, insistent, persistent. It has to be really on the level of intentional and committed. So it takes a different effort now to come together to say, this is what we want to do. Oftentimes it's so much easier to have someone there from the outside, because you don't have to worry about, making it happen with all the personalities in the room and the history and, connections and politics. And from there, really making a plan to continually ritualize and embed, as I mentioned. And that's the part where it doesn't become so thoughtful. So it's just like a habit in your life. With less time, I think we surpassed our memory, our attention span went below the goldfishes years ago. And it's continued to drop. So, we have to work with where we are right now, and that attention span being so low, we've got to be very conscious about what it is we're going to pay attention to. And if you want to change a habit at home, it's going to take the same focus these days.
You had a gold quote in there. I want to give you space to say it again. The change requires, what were the three things?
Consistency, insistency, and persistency.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
and then it was
not mine, but I love it too.
yeah. Love it, love it, love it. Good stuff. Well, maybe you could share what's a powerful lesson you've learned, because what you're talking about is growth mindset, right? These filters of our brains, allowing new things in, requires us to be open, requires us to be curious. And so maybe as modeling behavior for us, could you share something that you've learned, a powerful lesson that you learned by going through something that was actually hard?
Yeah, there's a whole new field of positive psychology, which I've been studying for 13 years, and it's about a 25-year-old field. And we've much more recently, in the past few years, really gotten into what I consider positive psychology 2.0, which is the dark side of emotions and how important they are for our resilience, for our anti-fragility, for rebounding, for understanding. And one of the most important things that you can do is to look in the shadows, not run from them. And I think that's kind of common knowledge now, but it's harder in practice when they actually come up, to catch yourself, not spacing out, Netflixing out, or exercising, or whatever it is, or, going into email or scrolling. So catching yourself is the first part that can sometimes be a challenge. And then, stay with it. And the question that came out from the science of thriving in a way, but really it came out of post-traumatic stress versus post-traumatic growth, is to ask the question, what did I learn? That's it. So simple. The painful thing happened, the challenging thing happened. You're in a difficult situation right now, which makes it a lot harder to see. Mindfulness and meditation can help give you distance from that. But then is to really find that little bit of space to ask yourself, either what did I learn or what am I learning?
I find that to be such a powerful thing, especially when I think in the rearview mirror a long time, right? Some really painful experiences from high school or earlier in my life. If I'm honest with myself, like those were the ones where I really learned the most. For sure, I didn't want to go through them. For sure, they were painful experiences, but they were the places where I learned the most. And so then, wow, how do I do it in the moment? That's without the benefit of time. How do I do it in the moment? Like, oh, wow, this is hard. And shifting away from this is hard, I don't want this, I want to run away, to inspecting the shadows and what am I learning and how can this be good for my being?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of that is inner work and inner steps. One that's fairly well known is Tara Brach's RAIN, is to first recognize that you're having a difficult emotion, and then RA, accept it, right? So it's okay, this emotion also belongs. And you know what? I'm not a negative or unhappy person because I'm having a challenge. I'm a normal person because I'm having this challenge, And then investigate it. What is the message behind it? Or what is the true need behind it? You might look at your impulses, which, could be to run away or do something different or sweep it under the table. And by asking that question, you end up sitting with it for a moment.
I
And
love it.
the last step is nurture, to, give yourself what you need. But do bring in that question. I would recommend in the end, at some point, what did I learn from this? Or what am I learning?
Beautiful. In this world of allowing humans to be their best selves and treating wellness, well-being as a new measurement, are there companies or leaders that are getting it right, or that you'd like to call out as, doing some things right, at least?
Absolutely. I mean, this conference, is a testament to more and more curiosity. Since I started, I was a happiness consultant, and one of the world's first. People laugh me out of rooms. You're a what? Yeah, okay. Businesses are going to pay for that. And it became a curiosity, and I did a lot of talks, a lot of keynotes and breakout sessions. And then I just started to do more consulting. People started to say, come in and teach us this. And I think we're now in this workplace renaissance, where people are realizing that there's an incredible opportunity to actually realize this change, which, as you said earlier, Scott, it's not rocket science. It's just that our readiness for it has changed. Most of us have experienced it personally: burnout, stress, daily worry. We've felt the impact of these negatively on our lives and our work lives. So there's a readiness to, sit down and make a meal out of it, so to speak, and to take some actions. So I think that's a really exciting sort of time to be in. And it's no fun to be walking around in the Renaissance. Like, people back in the old Renaissance weren't going, isn't this cool? The printing press is wreaking havoc. And we're not going to be like, isn't this AI thing so cool right now? Yeah, it's making my life so much more confusing and complicated. But when we look back, I think we'll see these incredible changes that we've taken. And the time is now to recognize those opportunities are here.
Beautiful. And Sunny, if people want to find you or continue the conversation, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, sunnygrosso.com. Sunny Grosso, spoken like an Italian, eh?
Grosso. Well, thanks so much. And before we leave, Sunny, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope? When I see leaders who truly take this work on themselves, not as a do as I say, but as a, this is important to me and I'm starting with me, because that's really where change begins.
Beautiful. Well, Sunny, thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for being your full self at work and in the work conversation. And thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Scott. Namaste.